Today I'm going to talk about fear, and let us think about fear and how does it work and why is it useful, because of course I've always been emotional and I've always let my, well, that's a label, yeah, that's a label. Anyhow, I have always let my emotions emerge so as to feel them and perhaps express them or find ways to express them, acknowledge them, try to understand them, study them, work on psychotherapy in order to understand those emotions and understand perhaps that the emotions, certain emotions like negative or painful emotions are there as a sign that there are unmet needs. So emotions are useful. Anyway, for example, every morning I go to walk the dogs for a long walk, like at least 1 hour or 2 hours, in a very, very beautiful place, which is El Parco delle Gole della Breggia. It's just 5 minutes from my home in Ticino in Switzerland. And it's a place, it's a very special place because it's a small valley, but surrounded by high mountains, yeah? And woods, it's all woods. And in the middle there's this ex-cement factory. Now it's now a museum, and it's a beautiful place, just beautiful place where there's deer and there's foxes and there's herons and there's lots of animals and so on. Anyway, I go to walk the dogs every morning there, and there is a long walk, yeah, that goes up and down and up and down, and because there is a river and there is waterfalls and there is parts in which you pass from one mountain to another mountain, and in the middle there is the river down there with rocks and everything, and there is a little bridge, a wooden bridge, so you pass above that very high place, you know. So there are places that make me afraid, and fear, I'm afraid, but sometimes I go anyway, yeah. Not always. Sometimes I'm afraid and I decide not to go to the long walk that passes through that bridge, and other times I decide to go, yeah. So it's quite interesting because sometimes I let my fear win, and sometimes I overcome my fear and I do it, you know. But in any case, I always imagine that the worst is happening. For example, about this bridge, just before passing the bridge, I imagine that it's going to fall, yeah. And I imagine all detail that what would happen if I fall down, yeah. Of course I would be dead, you know, and then I think that nobody would find me, and because since I live on my own, and you know, perhaps my daughter would realize that I'm not there anymore, but after a couple of days, so I would be like you know, half dead there down the river, and I don't know, it's like I imagine everything with all detail. I imagine the horror. The same thing happens to me when I fly on a plane. So when the plane leaves and when the plane arrives, I imagine the worst with all detail. And the same happens in the tunnel of Gottardo here in Switzerland, that goes in the middle of a mountain, and it's 17 kilometers long, and it's two-way, and there's no protection between the two ways, yeah. So you see the trucks coming towards you, you know, and I imagine, you know, that a truck driver is drunk and then he goes into my lane and you know, and then the accident happens and fire and, you know, I imagine everything, the sound and the pain and, you know, it's just like, the thing is that, okay, I'm interested in extreme situations. Otherwise I wouldn't have done the life that I have done, and I wouldn't, you know, work in prison and so on. I'm interested in those extremes. And the horror usually appears in dreams, but it's like, okay, if we live a life, like a normal life, where everything is more or less okay, and you live comfortably, yeah, like my life right now, the horror needs expression. According to Carl Gustav Jung, everything in the unconscious regularly needs expression. So if we live a life that is quite normal and comfortable, more or less comfortable, we need to express that horror. Therefore, but this is an explanation that I have given myself, because it's not that I'm imagining all these things because I'm convinced that this works. It's just like I have found an explanation that suits this instinct of mine of imagining what's worse. But I'm not the only one, actually. My friend, I go with to walk the dogs with a friend often, not always, but often, to this same park, and he is also similar in the sense that he also imagines terrible things happening. But what's funny is that some people think that if you imagine the worst, that you're going to attract and it will happen. You know, some people really think that. I think that that's quite an old idea, you know, and or tradition. I don't know, but I think it's the opposite. So because the horror needs expression, I will give expression to the horror so that it doesn't happen in my life, really. Yeah. So, you know, you'll think that I'm mad, but I just do it, and I do it anyway, so this is a possible explanation. But in any case, the fear... So Nelson Mandela said that the courage is nothing, is no other than... How do you say that? No, the courage is the process of overcoming the fear. So there is no courage without fear. So it's not true that, you know, people might say, oh, I'm not afraid of anything, you know. That's not true. The thing is that you decide to overcome the fear once and again and again. But I let the fear win too, sometimes. And then I say, no, I'm going to overcome the fear today. Today I'm going to do that, you know. And I will do that bridge, and I will walk through the bridge, and I will imagine still what's worse, but I will do it anyway. And then my friend says, well, that's not fear then. And I say, well, yes, it's fear. It is fear, because sometimes I just don't go. You know, I decide to stay in the safer part. But the thing is that I'm a recoverist. And recovery is, to me, the key of evolution, of human evolution. It's the key of life today. It's what we are all called to do today, during this pandemic and after all that's been happening in this world right now. We need to be able to be free, to be more free, to be able to fall, touch rock bottom, and then overcome that or recover from that, and then again and again constantly recover from things. Actually, lately I have sort of discovered, because sometimes I really take care of myself and I'm sort of vegetarian and I really eat very healthy, and sometimes I just hurt myself a little, like with coffee and sugar, or with a beer, some beer, but not a lot of beer. But The thing is that I cannot, and I don't want to, and now I am convinced that it's just right, to a little bit of self-destruction, so that then after a while you feel bad and you say, no, now I'm going to take care of myself, and then you take care of yourself. So our mind, our body and our spirit benefit greatly, not from being rigid and always taking care of ourselves, but from hurting ourselves and then taking care of ourselves, hurting ourselves and then taking care of ourselves, and recovering constantly from something. Yeah, and this keeps me alive and keeps my inextinguishable inner fire burning high.